So in my first YouTube, I tried to answer these two questions. What message do the stars tell? And why do some people think that it's a Christian message? My name is Lois Clymer, and I'm the author of Sacred Strands. So I'm going to use pictures this time. Down through the ages, people have drawn these constellations because they don't really look like what they say they are. But so they draw pictures of them, and there's been a lot of pictures, and that way they can remember the name of the constellation. But first of all, let me say that you might have noticed that in addition to using the Bible, I also use some of the myths and the religious beliefs from a long time ago. And the reason I do that is because they were looking at the constellations. They were seeing the constellations. They were interpreting them. And so they thought their gods were going to die. They thought their gods were born of a woman and in a supernatural way. Because they were looking at the constellations, they were interpreting them. And so that's one reason why I look at what the myths say. Okay, now this picture here is a Virgo, and this is Coma. Coma is holding a child. Sometimes Virgo is holding a child, but this one is from Egypt before Christ. That's probably 100 BC, something like that. It was found in Dendera, and I think somebody moved it to another place like France or somewhere like that. It has an interesting history anyway. And you can see the Egyptian figures here in it. So Virgo is holding a branch, and Coma, her cohort here, is holding a child. So I want to look at a certain verse in the Bible. This verse is from when God put Adam and Eve out of the garden. And at that point, they were no longer immortal. They no longer had bodies that would never die. But God promised them a redeemer. And he said, God says to the serpent, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Now this is Genesis 3:15. It's often called the Proto-Evangelium, which means first gospel. And this is the first time in the Bible that we find God talking about this coming Redeemer who's going to be born of a woman. And when it says seed of a woman, back in those times, that meant without a man. So that was something divine, because most people were born of the seed of a man. Then we also have various myths and so forth, like I was talking about. We have Charles Dupuy, who wrote about all the different religions in antiquity, and he said that what you find is the expected conqueror of the serpent, a divine person born of a woman who was to come. And so that is what we see here. We see here, and so the various religions, they interpreted however. They had no idea that Christ was going to come and fulfill this particular prophecy. So and there is in Gaul, there is an altar with an inscription that says, to the woman who is to come. So they were looking for it, but they didn't know when. Okay, now let's look at another picture. Let's look at Ophiuchus. This shows that Genesis 3:15 pretty well, because here we have the scorpion, and then here we have Ophiuchus, who has one foot on the near the head of the scorpion, and the place where he has his foot, there is a very bright star, and it's red, which is really fascinating that it be red, and it's called Antares, and it has a name which means wounded. So then we have his other foot over here near the stinger tail, And we have the same thing with Hercules. I'll show that. But here we see this verse. I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed, which would be Jesus Christ. He shall bruise you on the head. So here we have the scorpion, who is the accursed one, being bruised on the head. And here we have the tail bruising his other foot. And then if we look up here at Hercules, we can see that he has hit one foot on Draco, the head of the snake. He has his foot on one head, and he has his other foot held up as if hurt. And so there we have Genesis 3:15. Maybe you wonder why that is the Christian religion. We have a liturgy that we sing in our church that's very, very old. It's probably hundreds, maybe thousands of years old. And this is the way it goes. Adam is recalled from the dead. The curse is made void. Eve is set free. Death is slain. And we are endowed with life. Wherefore, in hymns of praise we cry aloud, Blessed art thou, O Christ our God. And so in this liturgy, this song, you see what is happening to us. We are fortunate that we can look to the what's sometimes called the second Adam, which is Jesus Christ, and he can give us eternal life. Okay, now we're going to move to a new one. We're going to move to the cross. So here we have the cross. Now it's actually the Southern Cross, because it's so low on the horizon that we can't see it. We couldn't go out at night and see it. We would have to travel around the world. But here it is, and it is underneath the Centaur. Now the Centaur is another constellation that is part man and part horse. That's what a centaur is. And then here is a victim. This is sometimes called the wolf. Now it's kind of interesting that we have Virgo here. This is one form of Virgo, and every author has their own shape for them. And then here we have the scales. Here we have the cross, and here we have a victim dying. And so you might ask yourself, well, is this the seed of the woman, Jesus Christ? Is the scales represent redemption or something like that? And how about the cross? Was that going to be the means of the victim dying? Well, we really don't know. It would be awfully nice if we had a book from when the constellations were written, and if that book would tell us exactly what they meant, but we don't have it. There may have been one at one time. I talked last week about Enoch possibly being involved in the early stages of astronomy, and he had written some books, but they're not. We don't have them anymore. So we can ponder this question, and we can realize that unlike the myths, Jesus really came. He actually did come. And we have the proof of it in the Gospels. We have the Gospels. We have certain first century men who actually wrote about Jesus. And perhaps the most tangible evidence that we might have is the Shroud of Turin. So I'm going to talk about that next time, so be sure to tune in.